Malaysia, the youngest nation in Southeast Asia, was formed in 1963, the result of federation between the former colonies Sabah and Sarawak with the already independent Federation of Malaya. Now a massive development program, the first Malaysia 5-year plan, is underway to develop the entire country. Its outcome can best be measured in the light of the experiences in national and rural development successfully implemented in Western Malaysia, the former Federation of Malaya. August 31st, 1957 marked the end of over a century of British rule over Malaya. This transition was accomplished amidst peace and goodwill. At Stadium Merdeka, the Duke of Gloucester formally handed over the instrument of independence to the country's first elected Prime Minister, Tunku Abdul Rahman. This historic occasion ushered in a new era for the people of the Federation, now united in a common loyalty and allegiance. The nation embarked on her independence with a great deal in her favor. Although the people hailed from many racial streams, they have long lived together in harmony, always displaying the greatest tolerance for each other's faiths, customs and cultures. Physically, the country had recovered from the ravages of war. Public services had been restored. The country's basic industries, rubber and tin, the twin pillars of her economic well-being, had returned to normal. And with exports rising by the year, the nation's financial position was on a solid foundation. Although the future prospects of this young country looked bright, there were many grave and pressing problems too which had to be encountered. Since 1948, there had been a state of emergency brought about by a small group of militant communists intent on overthrowing the government by tactics of terror and violence. Clearly, the first task was to secure an early victory so that the full resources of the country could be channeled to better uses. It had long been realized that the war could not be won by military means alone. To enable the misled rebels to surrender without fear of reprisal, the government declared an amnesty. This generous offer to mark the country's attainment of independence had the people's full support and was largely responsible in the surrender of a large number of terrorists and bringing the emergency to an end. Meanwhile, dramatic and solid progress was taking place. The pace and tempo of development activity was stepped up. Investment in new facilities, both public and private, was much greater than ever before. The nation not only thrived on the tests and trials of her newly won sovereignty, she had attained a degree of stability and soundness remarkable for a young developing country. In the early years of independence, emphasis was placed on expanding the social services, especially in the field of education. Within the country itself, more and more teachers were being trained to cope with the needs of a rapidly increasing population, half of whom are under 21. Together with a vast school building program, the government was able to provide for the first time a place for every child of school-going age. (1959) saw the country's first parliamentary elections. In a democracy, the actions and record of the government are held up for public judgment. The citizens and voters are the exclusive source of political authority, and their consent is the foundation of the power of government. The election resulted in a sweeping victory for the ruling party, which captured 74 of the 104 seats in Parliament. Never before were the people more united under the democratic leadership of Tunku Abdul Rahman. In a message to the nation, the Tunku indicated the paramount tasks facing the government and country in the immediate years ahead.
Now that the election is over, we can sit back and think of the tasks ahead. We have got a lot of work to do. The election campaign have revealed to me the things that we got to do in the kampong and the rural areas. These people have been neglected in the past. And this country, this government, should devote a lot of time and money in order to help these people to think rightly and to live rightly. And we've got to lift their standard of living.
Primarily an agricultural country, more than half the entire population are dependent on agriculture for their means of livelihood. Although this country is comparatively affluent in terms of natural resources and per capita income, this prosperity was not reflected in the rural areas. For most rural dwellers, life was one of continual struggle and toil, with meager rewards for labor and effort. The rural areas presented a grim picture of poverty, compounded by the lack of decent amenities. If independence was to have any real meaning for this large section of the population, then something had to be done, and done quickly, to redress the economic and social imbalances between the rural and the urban areas. In 1959, a separate Ministry of Rural Development was established, headed by the Deputy Prime Minister Tun Abdul Razak. A former top civil servant, Tun Razak realized that any development plan by itself is of little use unless it can be effectively implemented. From now on, the national watchwords had to be action and results. To this end, the entire government machinery was reorientated to effect maximum development implementation. Old methods and attitudes had to go. New systems and techniques had to be evolved. What's more, there had to be at all levels a sense of enthusiasm, dedication and drive. A major factor in the battle for rural development was the formation of the committee system. At the federal level, the National Development Committee. Here, top government leadership formulates and coordinates national development policy into effective action. The State Development Committee. Here, coordination and implementation of the national and state development efforts are accomplished. The same procedure takes place in a more minute fashion at the district level through the District Development Committee. Here, the focus of development becomes more pinpointed to actual needs. The all-important base of this structure is the Village Development Committee. It is here where actual needs of the people are expressed directly through their spokesman. It is here where results are felt. This structure of the Development Committee system ensures that policy can be effectively translated into action, and that action achieves results. At the same time, it establishes a two-way channel, a facility of intercommunication between government and the people. The battle plan for development is the now celebrated Red Book. In it, the Prime Minister directed that all existing government services will now focus on rural development with the object of giving the rural community the pride of place which is its due. Prepare the way for the prosperity of the rural dweller by providing a sound economic foundation for his way of life, his agricultural livelihood, and for the economic development of his rural industries. Each Red Book holds a basic map of a district. Over this are superimposed on tracings projects existing, planned and recommended in respect of every government department at work in the area. In one complete ledger, the needs of a district are graphically portrayed, bound in a general compendium. The book elicits, coordinates and recommends all in one. The minister himself took to the field to explain at all levels what must be done. Development committees were to take stock of that which existed and where, recommend improvements, consider new proposals. And most of all, implementation was to be accomplished without red tape, minimum correspondence, in all cases to be decided by personal discussion and joint consultation. Now development teams began touring the rural areas, reaching into every corner of the development effort. Forums were held to ascertain the wishes of the people. Thus, the masses could exercise the privilege of communicating with their elected leaders, and through them to the national leadership, and make known their legitimate requirements and aspirations. The government was acutely aware that promises must show results, and that such must be met with quick replies. A host of minor projects were launched simultaneously throughout the country to provide immediate amenities to the villages. These projects were joint endeavors. Government supplied materials and technical know-how while the people contributed their labor. These efforts not only met urgent needs, but at the same time forged the motivation base necessary to achieve a feeling of togetherness between the people and the government. The operating machinery which placed development in motion begins with the National Operations Room, the nerve center of development. It is here where the red books, the strategic battle plan for development are brought together. It is here that the intelligence necessary to plot the battle are available within arm's reach. Maps, charts and up-to-date progress reports on all projects. The room is a crystal ball showing at a glance what is going on in the way of development in any part of the country. Here is plotted the strategic and tactical offensive of national development. How is this accomplished? At regular briefing sessions before the minister, heads of departments are required to give an account of progress or lack of progress so that delays may be pinpointed and eradicated through on-the-spot top-level coordination. These briefings with cross-questioning by the minister ensure that every official is on top of his job, and that everyone concerned is fully brought into the picture. Thus, all can see clearly how their tasks fit into the mosaic of development. The process is carried down to the state and district level, where officials of every department must answer for their progress. The pressures are great. Results, and only results, are what will satisfy. These briefings are not events in secret. They are witnessed by the people, their elected leaders, and the press. The minister constantly stressed the importance of time. Time was a vital factor. There had to be a sense of urgency, for a 5-year plan does not give one a full 5 years. There are actually only 1,000 full working days. The battle for development was on. At every point, teams of officials were on the ground to bring their combined experience to achieve target dates. In many cases, their efforts exceeded original goals. In the first phase of the National Development Program, government shouldered the responsibilities of the major projects. It was necessary, first of all, to lay the infrastructure in preparation to redress the imbalance between the urban and rural sectors. Irrigation proved a boon to the farmers, enabling double cropping, increased yields, and greater incomes. The development effort continued unabated. In addition to providing essential amenities to towns and villages, a bold endeavor was made to open up vast tracts of virgin jungle to provide land for the landless. Land settlement schemes are the responsibility of the Federal Land Development Authority, whose duty it is to promote and assist the investigation, formulation and carrying out of projects for the development and settlement of land in the country. The efforts of the FLDA have been met with signal success. Many tens of thousands of acres have been cleared and thousands of families have now settled on their own land and in their own homes. Settlers come from all the races in Malaya and are selected on the basis of physical fitness, experience and need. Every assistance is given to settlers to start their new life. These land schemes are designed to provide full employment and full returns for the farmer and his family. Each settler is allotted 10 acres, 2 of which are for his house and garden plot. The remaining 8 acres are planted with high-yielding rubber. In time and with hard work, the settlers will pay off their loans and can be assured of an income far beyond their former subsistence way of living. On many land schemes, the oil palm has been planted in place of rubber. This is an important step towards the goal of agricultural diversification. The development of education was a major effort in the overall plan. An additional 3,000 classrooms were constructed in primary schools, increasing enrollments from 980,000 to 1,200,000. The traditional system of education is being reoriented to achieve not only the objectives of nation building and universal literacy, but also the specialized needs of science, agriculture and commerce. The main program in the promotion of better health was through the Rural Health Service involving health centers, sub-centers and midwife clinics. These facilities provided maternal and child health as well as dental care. Community centers have made their appearance under the Rural Development Plan. These halls are not only a place for social recreation, but through the government's intensive adult education program, they are the focal point for the development of rural leadership. The establishment of cooperative marketing and consumer societies have given the farmers and fishermen the maximum benefit for their labor, and the consumer a fair price for his food because of adequate marketing and distribution facilities. Curing centers too have been set up in many parts of the country to process the excess catch. In addition, central rubber processing factories have been established up and down the peninsula. These factories, with their modern facilities, ensure high quality and top prices to the smallholder. A special service was set up for the promotion of small industries backed by training facilities to enable the rural people to participate in commerce and industry. The establishment of small-scale and cottage industries have raised income and standards of living among large sections of the rural population. Throughout the countryside, rural markets have been built to establish a central point for both seller and buyer. Every effort has been made to provide the stimulus and incentive to raise the rural economy. Not only must the government do its part, the people too must carry out their responsibilities. Community development projects motivated by the spirit of self-help have been instrumental in the improvement of countless kampongs and villages. These projects have instilled in the people a spirit of self-reliance, initiative and enterprise. The progress made over the last 5 years has been impressive and gratifying. The people and the government can take just pride in their achievements. Since the launching of a development plan, the very face of the country has changed. The people in the rural areas now enjoy amenities which never existed before. They are leading a better, healthier and more productive life. Firm foundations have been laid for the creation of greater happiness and prosperity. But Malaysia realizes that she cannot afford to be complacent. The key to progress and prosperity lies not in satisfaction in what has been achieved. It requires a firm determination to make even greater efforts in the future. The path of development is by no means easy, and the next few years will be crucial in the history of the nation. All must redouble their efforts to sustain economic growth and development in the face of many complex problems and challenging tasks ahead. The country's success in implementing her national and rural development plan is a tribute to the vision, courage and dynamism of her Deputy Prime Minister Tun Abdul Razak. With unflagging energy, he has traveled constantly to survey the entire spectrum of development, picking up new approaches and applying pressures where needed. Continually being on the ground, these contacts have resulted in a working partnership between the government and the people, a partnership which augurs well for the future. The way in which this country has moved ahead in development and the changes which have been brought about through her unique implementation technique can truly be said to be a silent revolution.